Hey guys, welcome back. So in this video I want to go over the joinery sled and how you can use it at your router table. I want to walk you through the setup and what it looks like to transfer from your table saw over to your router table and what you have to do to this thing to get it working right. I got a couple joints here today that I want to show you how to cut. The first one being this stopped sliding dovetail. So it's got a stopped groove right there, and then we got our dovetail, and it's going to go on there just like that. And then the other one, it's pretty similar, but it's just a full through sliding dovetail. So I'll show you how to cut that, and we'll show you how to cut the other end too, so everything can slide in nice and smooth. Alright, so I brought this back over to the table saw, and you can see how this is mounted in my right miter slot, and that's because my blade tilts to the left. If your blade tilts to the right, then you'll want to work with this thing in your left miter slot. And you can flip this completely around, and I'm going to show you how we do that over at the router table. But also notice how my fence is right here to support cuts when I go through. Alright, so this is my current table saw setup. Let's go over to the router table and I'll show you how to dial it in from there. Alright, so fresh off the table saw, we're going to slide this in to the miter slot on my router table. And you'll notice how the handle is on this side. So whenever you're going to want to feed this through here, you're going to want to feed from right to left. So I'll be going this way. Now, if the handle being on this side doesn't bother you, and it doesn't bother me honestly, you can go ahead and just pull this thing through your workpiece, and you can avoid this future setup. So if you want to do that and quickly switch from table saw to router table, I would recommend you just leave it like this and operate it by pulling this handle. Now the only other adjustment you're going to have to make is you got to flip around your fence so that the MDF is facing this way. To do that, we'll just loosen those two knobs, and I can quickly flip this thing around. Now if you want to take this a step further and get the handle riding over here so you can push it through, all we got to do is detach the base from the miter bar, and then we'll just flip it around and reattach everything. And so to do that, you can just loosen these screws right here with an Allen wrench, and go ahead and loosen them all the way so they come out of that miter bar. So that one's out. And then go ahead and loosen the other one all the way. And after that, you can lift this base, and we'll move this miter bar and just flip it around 180 degrees. And then I can just screw this sled right back onto the miter bar where I detached it from. Okay, but now that I went ahead and moved this, we're still going to leave these a little bit loose, because next I'm going to show you how to dial this in so that it's riding perfectly parallel to my router bit. So the first step to dialing this in, I'm going to set the top portion of this base so that it's somewhere around the middle of its travel. It has 3.5 inches of travel all the way forward, and you can bring it all the way back. I'm just going to set it about right there, close to the middle, and then lock these two up. Now to get this thing to ride perfectly parallel to the router bit, we're going to have to reference this face up against something inside of this router. So I wouldn't recommend that you use a router bit. I have a Dovetail router bit in there right now, and you know, when you're referencing things up against it, you might damage your cutting tool. But even worse, it doesn't have a perfect dimension, you know, like it's not perfectly round, so you're going to have a harder time dialing it in. So I do recommend that you use something like this 1/4 inch stainless steel, like dowel pin rod. There was some of these in this saw gauge 2.0 kit from Woodpeckers that I have, and so you can use that. Or if you have a Craig adjustable shelf pin jig, there's also a similar pin like that that you could use as well. You're just going to need to put a 1/4 inch collet into your router and then go ahead and install one of those pins. I'm going to use the Woodpeckers one. Alright, so now I'm all set up. I can dial this thing in, and it doesn't take very long at all. First, I'm going to remove this fence to get it completely out of the way. Then I got this scrap piece of wood, and I'm just going to slide the base until this edge is pretty much right in front of that little dowel pin rod there. So now I can just press that up against there, so that's nice and tight. Grab my Allen wrench and snug that down on this side. And I can remove that, slide it to the other end, and do the same thing. You'll notice I'm just using a scrap piece of wood. I did joint and plane this before, so it is pretty much perfectly dimensioned, so you don't need any kind of crazy setup tools. A scrap piece of wood is just fine. So after you do both ends, slide it back and recheck, and you might have to make a tiny bit of adjustment. I got a little bit of friction there. And then in between here, there's none. So I'm going to go ahead and push this forward just a little bit more. And that feels good. You can tell because it's just barely pinching between that dowel rod and the table. You can feel the tension in the wood a little bit. Recheck down here. Feels good. Check it at the center. Feels good as well. So that's it. This is now riding perfectly parallel to my cutting tool once I get that installed. Alright, so I got my 1/2 inch 14-degree dovetail bit installed, and first I'm going to show you how to set up to cut this stopped sliding dovetail groove, the female end. So the first step to that is to put your bit in, raise it up, and then turn it so the cutting edges are facing out like that. And then come up with a scrap piece of wood to the edge of your bit, and we're just going to mark this out. This is going to help us set our fence stop so we know where to set it at. So I'm going to mark that there. I'm going to go ahead and mark this side as well. And then after that, I can go ahead and drop this down. The reason we have to do that is because we don't want to mill this thing too deep, because as you see there's like a rounded end right there, and we're going to end up cutting a little bit of a notch off that so that when it goes in it covers that like that. And so now we need to set this stop position. So the piece that you're going to be cutting the sliding dovetail on, go ahead and grab that, and we're going to set this fence stop. First we'll align this edge to this line right here, and then once we do that, I'm going to go ahead and set my fence stop up against the edge of my workpiece. Alright, next I'm going to go ahead and raise up this router bit so that it's at a 1/2 inch. Just a little under, which is fine. And then lastly, I'm going to turn this so that the cutting edge is facing towards the fence. And I got a 3/8 inch setup block here. I'm going to lock my micro adjust, and we'll slide this fence forward. So that's all set up. Now we can make our cut. Okay, so here is our stopped sliding dovetail, and you'd want to do something like this for like a leg, like a table leg or something. But if you want to do one across the grain for like a little frame or whatever. Then this is how I like to make that cut. So I just have a scrap piece of plywood. This is square along here, and then I just super glued on this piece of 2x4 to act as a little handle for myself. So to cut this, I'm going to flip this stop up, and then I'll just keep this piece pressed tight against here and the fence, and then just push it through the bit. So fresh off the router, that's what that looks like. Now, if doing it this way with this little jig sketches you out for whatever reason, and you want maybe a safer way to do it, you can also do it by using this iron grip small parts holder. This thing's pretty cool. So it has this acrylic fence that rides up against my router fence right there, and then it has this adjustable fence in here that you can move back and forth, and there's these little clamping pads down here to protect your piece of wood. So I'm just going to throw another piece in here, and then this other piece on the right is just to protect it from blowout. So put that up there, and I'll tighten that up. And now I have these two handles right here to control everything and run it through. Okay, and same thing, just accomplished with another tool. A little safer if you're doing a lot of parts like that. The iron grip small parts holder might be a big help for you. So now that I got both of my sliding dovetails cut in these pieces, I'm going to go ahead and remove this fence and put the joinery sled in there and get all set up to show you how to cut the male end of this sliding dovetail. One thing you want to make sure of, do not change the height of your router bit. Leave it exactly where it's at. Since we already went through the process of dialing in the joinery sled to ride perfectly parallel with our router bit, the only bit of setup work we have to do here is to just square up the table to the router table, and then to install the fence and square that up as well. So the sled's square. Now I'm just going to throw on this fence. While I'm here, I'm going to lock in my height real quick so the fence can't accidentally drop down and hit the bit by tightening this Allen key on the back. Now with both knobs loose, this thing cannot travel up or down. It's not going to hit my bit. So I'm going to bring it back and then square up the fence. And then last thing I'm going to do is to just drop down this sacrificial MDF fence so that it's just a hair off my table. So here's the workpiece I'm going to be cutting the male end of the sliding dovetail into. It's a little under 3/4 of an inch wide, and I want to mark this from both sides so that the measurement between both of them is a 1/2 inch, because I'm using a 1/2 inch dovetail router bit. So I'm using my Polini pocket rule here to mark that out, and that's just going to make setting up this bit a lot easier. So you can see right there, there's a 1/2 inch in between. And then I'm also going to add a line on top up here. Okay, so with that marked out, we can go throw it in the joinery sled and then set up the fence position so that we can make this cut. Now I can just clamp this in place, and we'll just adjust the in and out position of the joinery sled to get this set up right where we want it. And those layout lines that we just drew are going to be super helpful. So I'm going to get it here, and then just loosen the red knobs and dial it in with the micro adjust. So I have my bit turned so the cutter is facing my workpiece. And what I'm aiming for is the short end right here. I'm trying to line that up with this line that I just drew. So I'm going to micro adjust that over and get that kind of close, just outside the line. It's better to have the male end be too big, and then we just need to, micro adjust forward to dial in the cut, rather than to overcut it. Then you need to, cut off your scrap workpiece and try again. So you really just want to sneak up on this cut, but let's make a test cut and see how we did. Just going to unclamp and flip to the other side, and we'll make one more pass, and then we can do a test fit. So, fresh off the joinery sled, this sliding dovetail is still too big. And we can also tell that because the lines that I drew there are still visible, and there's some wood that you can see on the outside of there as well. So I'm going to micro adjust it forward just a hair and try it again. And then to micro adjust it, I'll just loosen these red knobs, keep the black ones tight, and then I am just going to do a very small turn. Alright, let me try again. And it doesn't quite fit in there just yet. So this is normal. I mean, it usually takes anywhere from probably 2 to 4 times to dial this in, but that's completely fine, because once you get it dialed in, you can run as many through as you want, and they're all going to come out the same. So I'm going to clamp this back up in here, micro adjust forward just a hair, and then we'll try it again. Super close. I mean, I will definitely, I think, nail it on the next try. One more. Okay, that definitely took me about 4 tries to get, but it came out good. So, just slides right in there. Nice and tight. And it looks great. I'm really happy with it. And yeah, now I can cut as many as I need. I'm going to cut one more so I can show you that technique for doing that notch for the stopped sliding dovetail. Okay, so here's that piece that we just cut at the joinery sled. And next I'm going to show you how to figure out where you need to cut this notch so that it'll fit when you slide it in. It'll be nice and flush with the top of your leg. And my method for doing that is pretty simple. We're just going to pretend that the side with the X is the side that I'm going to want to be my show face. So I'm placing this would be the inside of the table at this point. This part with the shorter reveal would be the outside of the table. So I'll put the side with the X facing the inside. I'm going to slide that down until it stops. And of course that's not going to go all the way in because we did that on purpose by milling that slot a little short. Next I'm just going to take a mechanical pencil and mark all the way around the piece to give me a cut line. So now I can remove this leg and we'll clamp this in place and cut it with a handsaw. Now to give the teeth of my saw a better starting reference, I'm first going to make a little indent with my chisel. First I'm marking this to give me a stopping point with my marking knife and square. Then I can come over here and I basically just created a nice little shoulder for my saw blade to start. Now I can reposition this workpiece to be a little more level. And then I'll grab my saw, and I'm only going to cut down to that little reference line that we made. Cool, that looks good. Now I can flip it up, and we'll cut to our other line. And I'm just cutting on the inside of the line because we're going to throw this back up into the leg and clean it up at the end with a chisel. Okay. Before I throw it back in my leg, I'm just going to clean up this cut just a little bit. Alright. We'll toss this back in there and throw it in the same way with the X facing me here on the inside. Now there's a little bit of material left over, which is just what we wanted, because I'm just going to come back and clean that up with a chisel to bring it down flush with my leg. Now that's perfectly flush, and when I go to flip it around and put it in the way it's supposed to be, perfectly flush, just how I wanted. And that's it. That's all there is to it. Well, I hope sliding dovetails are a little easier for you guys now after watching that video. I hope you guys enjoyed seeing the joinery sled on the router table and how to set it up and cut these joints and everything. I just recently came out with a video as well using the joinery sled over at the table saw, and I run through all the features of this thing, and I spend more time really focusing on the joinery sled and how this thing works. So if you want to learn even more about this tool, head over to that video and check that one out. But thank you guys so much for tuning in, and I will see you on the next one.